So who am I? I am Princess, apparently. I'm on the Ember Core Team, CLI Core Team, like lots of the teams. I do a lot of open source, but I do a lot less open source than I used to do. So hopefully, folks that are negatively impacted by that, because they're waiting on my reviews and whatnot, can appreciate that this is actually a good thing for me, and I hope you're happy for me. I work at LinkedIn. That's where I've been for 5 years now, 5 and change, and I really love it. Great work-life balance, great focus on actually shipping things. The overall mission of the company doesn't make me want to throw up. So I mean, all of these things are great. Anyways, so chat with me if you're interested. There's tons of jobs to apply for in general. Just ping me, probably best on Discord or maybe the jobs channel. I don't know. There's lots of places to reach me. These are my family. So here in Rhode Island, it is not allowed for children to go axe throwing unless they're 16. But my brother lives in South Dakota, and I don't think they really believe in laws about any sort of child safety there. So sorry if you live in South Dakota. So when we were out visiting him over Christmas, we went axe throwing, and I am now frightened of my children. So they are way better at throwing axes than I am. And yeah, so be careful if you ever happen to meet these two wild-eyed children. That's my beautiful wife there. We sort of are still hunkered down here in Rhode Island, but hopefully looking forward to getting out and meeting more folks back out in the world. All right, so let's jump into talking about V1 add-ons. Like I mentioned before, this is a pretty light deck overall. I spent almost all of my time trying to find those funny photos, so hopefully you enjoyed them. It's all downhill from now. All right, so this is a subsection of the API of V1 add-ons. This is not the entire list, and I had to shrink down that set up preprocessor registry because it was too long, and I didn't feel like trying to figure out how to make it work. So yeah, the basic gist here is that all of these APIs exist on the add-on base class. They were, I mean, I don't even know how long that base class as a thing has been around. It's been around for a long time, like five. I mean, 7, 8 years. I don't know, long time, a very long time. So when it first came out, it was extracted from a project that Luke and Steph and Chris Selden and others worked on. That was a grunt-based build pipeline. And so we sort of hopefully we learned lots of things from that, and built Ember CLI and tried to reduce boilerplate, make upgrades and migration easier, remove stuff that was in app code in your app that isn't really your responsibility for maintaining. That's why where we got the current Ember CLI build pipeline. The pipeline tries to hide a lot of the complexity from you. It mostly does an okay job if you're trying to do really common, simple, normal things. If you're not, there's probably an add-on that does that for you. And thankfully, those add-on authors are awesome people, and they did all the hard work and absorb all the pain. The way they absorb all the pain is with APIs like these. The upside here is that there is hooks into all sorts of things, and you can do almost anything. And the downsides are there's lots of ways to do everything, and you can do almost anything. Yeah, so the upsides and downsides are like the same. The figuring out what hook to use for any given thing is like, I mean, either go find an add-on that already did it, read through some old code, go digging through commits, ping someone on Discord. Like, there's good luck. Like, it's really difficult. This is usually this space where add-on authors and people that have built up that experience jump in and do stuff. But if you aren't that experienced person, getting that experience is really hard, because these APIs are not obvious. For example, the server middleware and test middleware are basically the same thing. One is for the dev server and one is for the test middleware, like the test middleware. But the arguments are totally different. Why? I don't know. They were added at different times and I didn't think about it. Note, I'm poking fun at a lot of this stuff because it's mostly my fault. So I feel like it's allowed, it's okay. We'll get into later where Ed's like saving us from past me, and it'll be great. You'll feel awesome. So another okay, I think I have a slide for this actually.
You got some heckling too. I just want to point out because this was a requirement in the chat. Yeah.
Yes.
We see all these tree kinds. Is there just a regular tree?
There, well, there's Christmas trees at Christmas time. Tree for Christmas, maybe. I think that's we should add that hook. PR's welcome next year. I'm sure that it will still be around. I apparently don't know how to. There we go. Okay, so here's some. I was talking about the issues. Here are some of the issues. I'm just gonna run through them. I don't have awesome animations or any pretty graphics, so you're just gonna have to listen to me ramble. The first one the first one I have a slide for. So for node resolution, if I add this code, where does foo come from? Like literally, where on disk does that actually come from? Like good luck. Could come from lots of places or come from nowhere on disk. Like it could be completely dynamic and generated, and there's actually no file. That is part of the problem I'm talking about. Now, for those of you that are familiar with add-on authoring experience, you'll know like, oh, maybe some package is an add-on and that add-on has an add-on folder that has an index.js. Great. Well, some package could also not have an add-on index.js and it could return any file it wants for resolving this. Or it could not have any files at all and it could dynamically generate a magical fake tree that just generally dumps like random class subclassing into foo here. Who knows? It is, I mean, it's not literally impossible to know, but it's like really hard. It is approaching a halting problem to figure out where the hell foo comes from or what it is. So that seems great, except not. But then think about apps like we have at LinkedIn, and I'm sure you all work on apps like this, where you have hundreds of add-ons. Where do you go find the things? Where do you find the docs? Where do you find the implementations? How do you look at the code? Like this is a real problem. So that's one of the big issues with the sort of current V1 add-on API, the classic API that we're talking about. Now, again, that classic API iterated over many years. And has sort of grown and built up over time. And I do think it is better than lots of other things that we've had. And there's no way I personally could have foreseen all the problems we have with it. But it's definitely time for something new. Okay, so let's keep going through this list. So the confusing trees concepts, the heckling is totally right. What the hell is a tree? Well, you're welcome that we didn't call them nodes because that was a really big front runner for a long time. Could have been all nodes, and then who nodes? No. Okay. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. All right. So okay. So the next thing here is sorry about the trees. Trees are just hard to explain. I actually think they're an amazing concept, and I find them very empowering, and building up the layers is quite straightforward and easy. But of course, I have the curse of knowledge. Explaining trees as if, oh, it's just a directory, but it's ephemeral, and every subsequent task builds up on the next one and returns a new one. Well, now you're starting to get complicated and it's like difficult to understand. Okay, so layered compilation. Now this is also a thing that I, at the time, thought was amazing. And have talked about a bunch with a beer in hand. The layered compilation stuff basically is trying to say, hey, if you're an add-on, you have a dependency on Ember CLI Babel, and that Babel is what transpiles your add-on code. So you get to control the transpilation of your code. You get to control the like the version of Babel, the settings, all that stuff. There was a time when I think that was really, really important, especially early on in like the 6 to 5 land, or even before that, like Esperanto. These are probably things you never even heard of, but they're the precursors to Babel. And back then there wasn't an obvious winner. There wasn't an obvious way to do transpilation. And in fact, there wasn't even an agreed upon combination of things to transpile or targets to transpile to. So back then it was like really important for the code that you shipped to know how to interpret its own code and output something that would work in the browser. Because frankly, the only thing that might know about that was the add-on itself. Now today, that's a lot different. Like the way that we want to ship code to a package manager to be consumed and used by apps is not the same way that we used to ship code. We used to only ship to like npm or Bower, I guess at the time, like minified code. And instead of people concatenating and then minifying again, they would concatenate the minified output and then sometimes minify it again, which is not a good idea, by the way. Don't do that. But like it was not uncommon to do. And I think anyways, this turns into a big dependency hell problem because we have a number of apps. Those apps have like probably 20 versions of Babel that they ship in node modules folder. Now, lots of them are within the same major, and sure, we could probably use some sort of resolutions or re-rolling lock files to unify them. Not always, because some package maintainers like to pin their deps because they hate me. But you still end up with things that are outside of ranges. Like we have apps that only recently dropped Babel 5 from some super deeply nested dependency location, right? And lots of our apps still have 6 and 7, although 6 is like slowly being petered away. But mostly that's because Babel 8 is apparently never. It's like what is that Doom? It's just never coming. They've been like theorizing about shipping it for years now. So I think that's the only reason why we're finally starting to unify on 7, because everyone's just sort of falling by the wayside. The Babel is just one example of this, though. There's others. There's SAS. There's combinations of auto import, and to some extent we end up making it a little bit worse with like test waiters, like how many different copies of Ember test waiters you have. We try really hard to make sure you only ship one, but that itself is complicated. Okay, so the next one here is about package.json. You may not have thought about this, but if you've ever been asked, well, how do I know I have an add-on, how do I know whether I should add this new thing as a dependency or a dev dependency? If you ever been asked that question, the reason you've been asked that question is because we make the package.json do too many jobs. One is a place for discovery, finding add-ons and traversing what to use and what to build. The other is to implement that layered compilation thing, right? So, well, your dependencies can control how you're compiled, but your deps can't. But never mind about your testing dummy app. That has different rules altogether. And that's yet another thing that your testing dummy app can do. That your package.json can do is it can just provide dependencies just for your testing app. Okay, and these other two things are pretty self-explanatory. I think tree shaking, code splitting, etc., are just features that the old system or the current whatever classic, I don't know how we're supposed to label the thing. That system just can't do. It is incapable. We've talked about it. The only way you could do it is to basically do the build and hook into some middle point and just do embroider at some middle point. But like that's going to be way longer than anybody is willing to wait for from a build time perspective. Like apps are already like at a point where they're in 5-10 minute land, and like just throwing another whole end-to-end packager in the middle is just going to be a nightmare. Okay, so I already talked about that. Okay, so V2 add-ons. This is where we're going to dive into some demo time. But first, some things to call out. There is no, so the new v2 add-ons system follows regular node resolution. So if you import foo from some package, it cannot dynamically generate content as that content that is going to be put there. It follows all the same rules, any NPM package that you use, whether it's a build time package, a runtime, like a browser time package, anything. It follows the normal rules. Now, those rules may be very annoying, but at least they're the same rules for everybody, and they're not just some weird Ember. So I think that is a big plus here. The ability to emit custom combinations of code to be returned via the tree for hooks doesn't exist. Intentionally doesn't exist. That's like a intentional limitation. Now the reason, or the result of that, and the result of losing lots of those other methods, like content for, included, all those things are gone. The result of that is that now the actual output is statically analyzable. We can actually run things and know intelligent information about the add-on code. I'll put that in context a little bit for folks that have done code mods in the past. Some of the code mods either I've written or other people in the community have written, where they attempt to determine, hey, is this given thing a component, or is it a Ember component or a Glimmer component or whatever? And that's actually really difficult to know. Like, we end up creating this whole concept of runtime assisted code mods, which is amazing, but is not even needed if we could just follow imports and figure out where things come from. We could just figure it out at build time, or sorry, at analysis time. We could walk the imports, we could determine what the base class is, and we'd know what to do. I think that is a huge reason the static analyzability is as important. Another thing is things like TypeScript or ESLint, they can't really know what you're doing. They can't know what your base class's methods are, or if you're calling super right, or if all the arguments are right. Like, there's just no way for it to resolve it. The way we get around it is by having custom type mappings and all that stuff. But that's like, we're just creating more hassle and pain for ourselves. Another thing here is that we don't really have required dependencies. Now, there is a caveat, we'll talk about it briefly, but the add-on shim is, some folks might consider that to be a required dependency, but it really isn't. It's only a required dependency if you want to support non-embroider apps. And I think most add-on authors will want to, but the point is, it's not built in, it's not required forever. It's a thing that will eventually, I don't know, sometime in the future, maybe it's another 5-10 years, but sometime in the future, people won't care about a classic build pipeline compatibility. And at that point, we won't have any required dependencies at all. With the add-on shim, v2 add-on spec is compatible with both embroider and non-embroider. So it's not, the add-on author doesn't have to choose. I should have switched these bullets actually. The add-on authors doesn't have to choose which, I only want to support embroider, or I only want to support classic. You can support both, which is great. Okay, so now what does it actually mean? Like, that was a lot of random shenanigans. Let's talk about let's walk through something. So I'm going to stop sharing and then I'll swap screens. If there's any actual questions, we can also jump in and talk about them while I'm figuring out what to share next.
I'm scrolling back.
Robert.
Yes.
You helped me while at Disneyland.
Disney World. I don't go to Disneyland.
Disney World, import a file from my add-on tree or some magic sauce. Does this solve that problem?
Yes. Well, so yes, you were basically creating a new file magically in the Broccoli file creator land and all that stuff. It solves it by making it not a thing that you can do. So it's a bit yes and no. Just don't do that. Just ship the thing. The next thing I'm gonna share is actually walk through some of the add-ons that Ed and other community folks have converted from V1 to V2 and talk about how it works, and hopefully not mess it up. and then we can just ask questions as we walk through and look at it. So that's my goal. I'm out of slides, so we're out of time. Okay, so here we go. Oh,
I don't
here's
see
Real Dev Squad website.
I don't see any other questions in the chat, but if I missed it and someone wants to post something they want me to read out, go for it.
I'm also trying to watch the hand raise thing too, so we'll see. Okay, so this is the RFC that describes the add-on v2 format. Is RFC Ember.js RFC 507. Some things have changed, but broadly it's still spot on. There's a couple of very minor details I think that have changed, and we may even have updated the content for that. But broadly speaking, it talks about the mutation. It does a better job than what I did, probably. Way less jokes though, so Ed, you should work on that. But the broad layout of like what it is we support. If each individual thing is not allowed to do transpilation, what do we support? Oh, it's vanilla JavaScript. It defines what that is, the language standard, all that stuff. Okay, so now let's look at add-ons that have been converted. Now, I happen to know, because in the RFC, the way you opt in is by saying version 2 in your Ember property on package.json. We can go to Ember Observer and we can search for that little string. This happens to just not be very common. You could totally imagine anybody having that, but it just happens to not be very common. So you can see a few of these add-ons, these pretty common add-ons have been converted, so we can go and poke at them. The first one that I wanted to look at was Ember Welcome Page. I don't think this was the first add-on to be converted in like abstract, but it was one of the first ones that belongs in the default Ember or CLI blueprint that was converted. So it's useful. So one of the things you notice out of the box when we look, there is no index.js. So that conceptually is gone. It's replaced with the file that we here called add-on main. That is here just returning the add-on shim. Now, most add-ons won't have any of this. It'll just be add-on shim under dir name, close paren, that's it. The entire point here, and the thing you can imagine this doing, and I think it actually in fact does do, but the thing to imagine is when this is consumed by Embroider, none of this code runs, it doesn't do anything. When it runs in Classic, it emits all of the tree4 included, etc., that the Classic system expects. So that's what this function is doing. If you only support Embroider, you don't need this at all. You can imagine your app, like for example, if you have an in-repo add-on or an add-on that only is used by one app, and that app happens to be Embroider, you don't even need to use the add-on shim there. The add-on shim also gives you some niceties around building and dev time for your add-on. But before we look at that, let's take a look at the package.json. You notice the only dependency we have is add-on shim. We don't have a CLI Babel dependency or any Babel dependency here. We do have dev deps for Babel, and that's because we compile our JavaScript specialness away at dev time. At publish time. So if we are only using regular JavaScript and not using special plugin syntax that isn't part of isn't preset env, for example, isn't aware of, we don't have to do anything special. We don't have to ship deps for it. We don't have to transpile that at runtime. If we do want to use special syntax, we have to file that away when we publish. And the way that works is with custom rollup config. This also comes from an Embroider package. This is a nice handy wrapper around managing your add-on. But the comments in here are pretty illustrative. Basically, the idea is when you're locally deving on your add-on and you're testing things, you talk about what the entry points are, what people are allowed to import from directly. Like, are they allowed to import your components directly, or can they only get them from your top level index, for example? What Babel plugins you need if you need anything custom. This one is supporting template collocation, but you could imagine you could add other plugins if you had other custom sauce, or maybe before knowledge coalescing was part of the spec, you wanted to use it, for example. You would add that here, and it would be compiled away when you publish, not when not by apps when they build, which reduces app build time. because they're just doing less stuff. All they have to care about is that final leg of transpilation, which the app really does need to control, which is the set of targets. Yes, Jen.
Hey, we got a couple questions in chat for you. Corey wants to know, is there any reason to support V1? We are going to upgrade the only add-on getting us from Ember 4.
So the V1 format is not directly related to Ember source version 3.4, 2.3.4, any of that. The V1 format is talking about people that in their app are using the sort of return app.to tree thing, like the CLI build file just is using the built-in Ember CLI build pipeline. So I think if the add-on in question only wants to support customers that are using Embroider, then you don't need to support both V1 and V2, and you can, in fact, not use the add-on shim at all. But I think for most single use or single app supporting add-ons or organization that maybe have all moved to Embroider, for most add-ons, I think you're going to probably want to use add-on shim because it'll take some time for actual consumers to migrate.
Can I cut in an answer too?
Yes.
In practice, it's not just that you need the app to be using Embroider, then you don't need the shim. It's that you need the app to be using Embroider and you need there to be no non-V1 add-ons anywhere in the build. And that's literally doesn't exist today because Ember itself is a V1 add-on, Ember Data is a V1 add-on. So it's just not a case that exists yet. So in practice, everybody needs the shim right now. And the reason for that is that every classic add-on can look around at the other add-ons and see them and expect to poke at them using the APIs of the classic build. So your add-on needs to be able to present itself as V1 if there's any other V1 add-ons out there poking at you. So in practice, you just need the shim today. But yet, it's not a big deal because it doesn't do that much. And as you get to the point where if you end up with an app that has only V2 add-ons, at that point, yes, it's going to be much, much easier to do a build that doesn't pay any attention to any of this stuff at all. It's just that gets easier once you don't need any of the compatibility stuff and you don't have any V1 add-ons left. So we did the work in the breaking change of Ember 4.0. We made sure that both Ember Source and Ember Data will be able to become V2 add-ons at any point now in the 4 series because there's no more breaking changes required for them to do that. So that can happen pretty soon.
Yeah, to dovetail on that, the only breaking change here to move to V2, there's 2 breaking changes to move to V2. One is it requires the host to have Ember auto import V2. And the second is that the host, the consuming project, basically. And Ember auto import V2 and Webpack 5 something, Caret 5. The second possibly breaking, but possibly not change is where people import your modules from. You totally control that. So you don't have to make this a breaking change, but in the classic system, the add-on folder is elided, it's removed from import paths. But in the new world, since we just follow normal node resolution, that's not the default. So the nice thing is this add-on dev pipeline gives you a really convenient way to solve that and address that. You just want to test the import paths still work the way you expect. Hassan, you asked about package.json main and re-exports, or not re-exports, exports. So I think this package actually does that. So add-on main can be SRC, like regular source. Where is it? At the top. It does have exports here. And these exports are interpreted the way you expect. It's just Node's export system. Now, if you're running in Node 12 something before exports is a thing, they aren't enforced in the same way, and the mapping doesn't always work. But when consumed in Embroider and auto import, they are respected because the Webpack stuff that we use respects them. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, just Webpack 5 does enforce these, so it doesn't really matter what your Node version is. Yeah.
Well, it matters your Node version because this is used for both Node land requires and
True.
browser land stuff. And I could totally imagine packages shipping both. It's a small detail, but I can imagine you, like add-ons today ship both node land code and browser code, and that probably will continue for various reasons. Okay, I think that answers the question. So the yarn, or sorry, the rollup config, we were walking through it, but it's pretty straightforward. And the whole point of this is local dev time. This is not done by app consumers or other add-ons that consume you. You do this locally when you're deving on the add-on, and you publish the output of this. That's the basic gist. Bill mentioned help for local add-on development. What are some of the benefits for dev productivity and happiness? So the first thing is you can do anything you want here. Now that may not necessarily sound good, but the upside is you can pull off the shelf functionality from either other Webpack plugins. Like for example, if you want to use Source Map Explorer, you can do that. It's really easy. You don't have to have someone smart write a wrapper that makes it work nicely. If you want to pull in some custom syntax or some custom resolution system for Rollup, you can do that. If you want to fine tune the tree shake, the code splitting, tree shaking points, you can do that. That's what all these plugins that the add-on dev provide for you. But the long and short is you basically just you can control more things. You don't have to. Right now, and this gets into Ilya's question. Right now, there are no new conventions. There's not a new add-on layout. There's not a new add-on blueprint. I am actively working on that. I had made a repo for it today, and I was trying to push through it, but I didn't get it done before the talk. But stay tuned. There'll be future meetups. We can talk about it then. The rough gist is there will be an updated blueprint. That'll have to be an RFC. It'll take some time for folks to review and figure out what's good, what's bad. I think that if you look through these add-ons here, lots of these have been transformed by Ed. So they obviously follow best conventions because Ed defined the conventions. So but you can also see, if you go from the older ones to the newer ones, you can see the evolution. You can see sort of some of the thought process changes and where things should go. Like in welcome page, the actual code is an SRC, which used to be an add-on folder, now it's an SRC. And this is all just one co-located thing, and it sort of just works. The SRC is elided because of the pet exports, but it doesn't have to be. Like, you could leave that in there. You could have it transport to lib, and people could import with lib in the path. It becomes just normal JavaScript publishing stuff. Next question, dummy app. Okay, so let's talk about that test app. So in Ember welcome page, unlike some of the other ones that I'm going to show and walk through quickly, there is no monorepo setup. We intentionally tried to stick with a non-monorepo setup, but the way that works is test app is a folder. It is not called dummy anymore. Thank you very much. And it has its own packaging. And this thing really is just a Ember new output. It's an Ember new thing splat into the folder. In fact, we probably should make it easier to do that, because right now we error if you have if you try to generate a new project inside of another CLI project. But anyways, this is just all the depths of a new Ember app. There is not a separate dummy app per se. There is a test app. That test app can have depths, can have dev depths, all that stuff that you want. In fact, you could imagine wanting multiple of these, and that's where monorepo type setup comes in really handy. You could imagine having one for testing and another one for my guides and documentation for my add-on. A lot of people merge the two things into the same dummy app today, but I think that actually makes things a little complicated to both. You can't really tell, is this particular thing here for testing, or is this particular thing here for just guides functionality or whatever. And then you end up having some trouble upgrading if some dep gets stuck or whatever. Anyways, in order to make this work, because this package isn't a monorepo, it doesn't use workspaces configuration, we have to copy those deps and dev deps from that package JSON into this thing's dev deps. And there are some handy scripts that are provided by the add-on dev package for you. And those scripts copy they copy the package JSON contents from the nested test app into this package. And the point of that is because most CI systems are just going to clone this repo and they're going to run yarn install or npm install, and those deps have to be around. This, I think, has its own set of complications. It removes a complication about workspaces, but it still has some complicated things like with the syncing. So let's talk about the other style setup, which is using a monorepo. This package has a monorepo with two set. Oh, hold on. Let me check for questions. I'm going to answer your question, Ilya, about the monorepo here. I just want to make sure there's not other. Cool. Seems good. Okay, so monorepo setup. I personally think this is the default that I do personally when I'm working on them. I think that it depends on your setup. It depends on like your organization's CI system may not really support monorepos well. Maybe you're on an older version npm or something. So there's lots of reasons why you might not want to do the monorepo setup. One of the problems that is common is it's really hard to use GitHub references to get at a monorepo's contents. That is true. But with the V2 setup, you kind of already have that combination of problems because we expect pre-compiling. We expect the assets to have been built to be consumed. So it's closer to, even if you didn't have a monorepo, if you were trying to use a TypeScript in Nodeland library, something has to compile that. You can't just use Git references in your package JSON. So personally, I like the monorepo setup, but I think it's important that we support both, and we can maybe chat about it in RFC if folks feel strongly that we shouldn't support both formats. But anyways, the monorepo setup is exactly what you might imagine. It just doesn't need those syncing scripts to sync the package JSONs around. The test app is, again, the same thing. It's just a normal Ember app. And it uses a link to get the like in this case, it's Ember focus trap. It just npm and yarn just know how to wire that up properly with links. The nice thing is in this setup, you can see how simple the add-on becomes. This is the add-on. This is the whole thing. The package JSON has very few dependencies and dev deps. It's really just the stuff used to locally dev on the thing. The rollup config is very simple. This is essentially the same thing you saw in the other package, just with modifiers instead of components. This is a thing that you may not be familiar with, but Babel config JSON is the de facto way for you to configure Babel. Using Babel config in this way lets you use like ESLint 8 and Babel ESLint out of the box without special configuration. This is something we need to get to for all add-ons if we want to be able to get off of ESLint 7. But that's a separate issue. What else? I think that's basically it. The point here that I was trying to show is just how simple the actual add-on code ends up being. And it's very, very simple. I kind of expected to see, I think we should add an npm ignore when we build up the actual blueprint, because I think some of these things just don't even need to be published unless they're, never mind, there's files. So always get trolled by that. Yeah, so all we're publishing here is the add-on main and the output for dist. So anyways, there's Ember Moment is also being converted. Ember Moment, I think, is in the same style as Ember Welcome Page, where it's not monorepo setup. There's examples there if you want to compare those two setups. But I think broadly that is that's all the rambling I've got in store for you.
anyone wants to unmute, give Robert a round of applause. Thank you
And I
so
stretched those
much.
10 slides pretty far, eh?
Yeah, that was pro level. You clearly, this is all of your years of slide presenting experience. So we've got a little bit of time for questions. If anybody wants to, you can click on reactions, raise your hand if you'd like to speak, or post in chat and I could read your question for you.
Robert, which add-on should I not convert to V2 yet?
So there's a number of add-ons that do shenanigans. Like in the default blueprint, or you mean in the world?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm asking an attention leading question about like what can't they do that other add-ons can do.
So there's add-ons that are trying to do like Ember composable helpers as an example. It can be V2. I'm not saying it can't be, but it's trying to intentionally give you ways to filter. Like it's trying to give you tree shaking via configuration in your CLI build file. And that as a feature doesn't exist. And we expect you to get that from Embroider and from just the bundling naturally. So I think that's good. But if you have APIs like that, those kinds of things just don't work. I think there's another set of add-ons that you shouldn't convert because they should just die in a fire, which are things like Ember CLI Pretender, which is one of my add-ons. Like it really had no value other than at the time Ember apps couldn't import from npm packages. There's other examples. I think some counter examples are like things like Ember Moment. Ember Moment actually provides a modifier, like the new version that Ed was working on. I think there's some cool wrapping stuff that you can do, but the way they should get the libraries is via normal npm imports and auto import type stuff. So any of those libraries, they're just wrapping some other thing and don't add any of their own functionality, should just go away and die. I don't know, Ed, I probably didn't answer the specific one.
Yeah, no, that was kind of what I was getting at. It's just if you're trying to extend the build pipeline for people, you're going to have to do it a different way. We're not going to let it be magically automatically inserted into the build pipeline anymore. So that's still a legit thing to do, but you need to come up with ways. You need to come up with instructions for the user to tell them how to get your feature into their build config. They own the build config now, so you got to ask them to import your thing and put it into the config that's being passed to Embroider.
Yeah. So that sometimes means somewhat less magicalness, but it also means that they can actually trace what's happening and figure out what's going on. So I think there's a bit of a double edge on that side.
Yeah, I would summarize as like the ideal amount of config isn't 0. It's like 2 lines, like import your thing and call your thing. That way there's at least a place to go to begin to understand how it works.
To trace through, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Jen, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah, there's a question from Bill on a different topic. I want to see, Ray, is your question on this topic or something different?
It's on this V2 add-on stuff. Does that count?
Well, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and read off Bill's then first.
Okay.
So.
Yeah,
I can read it, Jen. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so earlier you mentioned the benefit to engineers or developers, essentially you can do anything you want, right? So what if they wanted to use a different test framework? I'm not saying that they should, but I mean, I love our test framework. But what if they were new and they're like, oh, I want to use Jest? Is that something that would be discouraged?
So that is slightly different than what the V2 stuff is trying to do. However, I will tell you, it is my position that every test framework should be usable, and the coupling between the pieces that with the refactor that we did, I want to say 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I don't know. Time
the big
is
test refactor,
weird right now. But with that set of refactors, the things you import from @ember/test helpers are not tied to the framework, the test framework at all. Render, click.
They're not inside the run loop anymore.
They're totally independent of the test framework, of QUnit or Mocha or Jest or pick your poison. The parts that you import from Ember.Unit, like setup test, setup rendering test, setup application test, if you look at their implementation, there are less than 100 lines of code. All they're doing is calling public APIs from Ember test helpers. Like you could implement your own nice, and they're just there to make convenient wrappers, because who wants to call set up context, tear down context manually each time, right? Like that's basically the only reason they exist. I do think that there's a likely future where some more manual stuff will be done, at least in TypeScript projects. In TypeScript projects, this modification stuff that is done is very difficult to type. Well, not difficult, it's annoying to type. It's not terribly hard, it's just you have to type it all over the place and you got to repeat yourself, and it's very annoying. So I think having a thing that is returned that has the element, for example, or owner, and for that thing that can be well typed and structured, have that different from where you stash random properties for rendering components. I think that's something that we will see happen, and that separation of this context is stuff. I think there's actually an open RFC for that.
Very cool. No, thank you.
Ray.
So after like a few years of being like a Rust developer, coming back into Ember, I'm surprised at like how.
Would you say you're a bit rusty?
I'm a bit rusty in Ember. A lot of my app depends on Ember adopted add-ons, which is a little kind of scary, but cool. So is the plan to like migrate these adapted add-ons to V2 as well?
Some of them are. One of the ones that I had open, I think welcome pages in the CLI org, but I want to say Moment. I didn't walk through that one, but that one is in the adopted add-on org. Yeah, so there are a few are. Mostly the adopted add-ons is a place where when the original maintainer doesn't want to maintain it, they transfer it in there, and then when there's usually some other maintainer that's sort of stepped up that is willing to do it.
Cool.
So it's sort of like an easy way to transfer. So by and large, those things are still maintained, and they can be converted. I think the biggest, and I should have. I'll keep refining this deck. I need to do the same presentation internally, and I'll have to be a bit more refined. But I think some of the things to think about are, what are the breaking changes? What should you bundle up in a V1 to V2 conversion? Those, like, curating those breaking changes together is something that you should consider. Like, for example, it's totally possible for you to preserve the add-on folder if you just really want to keep having an add-on folder and keep having that just magically removed from people when they import. But I'm not convinced that's good. Like, that may result in a more confusing dev experience when you jump into a repo that's got an add-on folder. Is it V1 or V2? I think that's confusing. But those are things that be solved by there'll be an RFC that we'll write hopefully soon, hopefully this like next couple of months, but it'll be like the new add-on authoring experience, and that will define things like what Ilya was asking, which is like, are there new sets of folders? Like, are we going to use SRC? Are we going to use still use add-on or whatever? We will have a set of nice conventions for sure. We will probably even have the add-on dev thing that I showed in the rollup config have set a default, so if you don't do anything, but I think exactly where the balance is a thing that we have to figure out still.
So is there any like chance ever that like if you still are using V1 add-ons that things are just gonna like fall apart? Like
so
when is the add-on cliff, you know?
So it's a good question. I think there's a couple of answers. First of all, if you're using a V1 add-on and you're not using Embroider, or you don't intend to use Embroider, I don't think there's a cliff. Like,
finishes?
I think maybe, what's that?
Sorry.
No worries. If you're using V1 add-on and you're using classic Ember CLI, that's going to continue to work. There will eventually be a version of Ember CLI that probably doesn't ship the build pipeline stuff that it has in it now. But that'll obviously be a major release, and it'll be very clear. It'll be breaking. It'll be documented. It's certainly not 4 because that's already done. It's probably not 5, although maybe I hope it would be. I don't know. Who knows how long that's going to be from now.
Yeah. I think it's more carrots than sticks, because when you drop the last one that your app is using, you're going to be able to do a much faster, nicer build, and like radically faster build.
Yeah.
So and it already helps incrementally. Like the fewer V1 add-ons you'll have in a big app, we expect the build to go a lot faster. But like your adoption of being able to use other next generation build tools is relatively straightforward once there's no V1 add-ons involved. Like, if you want to try Snowpack, you want to try Vite, you want to try ES build, whatever the flavor of the day is, if they can understand standard JavaScript, then they understand Ember apps too, once you're on that. So I think that's going to be the motivation for people to get off of V1, because it ties you to a huge amount of backward compatibility code that's nice to be able to drop.
Right. And a thing I didn't talk about before, but the compatibility layer in Embroider is really good, but it is impossible for it to be perfect. The dynamism that you could do in the classic system is just like, it really is impossible for Embroider's compatibility layer to absorb everything. So you could imagine, to your question about a cliff, Ray, you could imagine having a V1 add-on and then converting your app to Embroider, and it can't determine something about how that add-on works. Like, that is a real problem. And that's why, at least at work, over the next couple of months, we're working on transitioning more. Before we push apps to Embroider, we're working on converting add-ons, because it just reduces the amount of friction for converting apps.
Cool, thanks.
All right. We'll wait another moment for any more questions.
Moment.js.
Moment.js. Luxon.
Sure.
Isn't that what we're supposed to use?
I would love
now?
to talk about Moment.js actually, because I'm on a rampage to try to reform the way people are using it in their apps. I would like all of you to go look at your apps and figure out how many copies a moment are shipping to production in your app, because I keep finding apps with more than one.
I bet you I have more than everyone.
that might be the contest.
I'm not sure if that's winning or losing, Ray.
Yeah. So
Whatever.
what I suggest about Moment is people should look at Ember Moment, which is an adopted Ember add-on. And by the way, I think if it was up to me, we would call adopted Ember add-ons like community supported add-ons. It's really a positive thing that they're there, not a negative thing that they're there, because it means.
Oh, hold on. Do you think being adopted is positive? I think it's very positive.
Yeah, it is positive. Yeah. Right. It's not orphaned Ember add-ons. It's not like
exactly.
Condemned Ember add-ons.
Exactly.
So if you look at Ember Moment, right now the README has a section at the beginning called Using Moment in Ember Apps, and it summarizes the state of things as I understand it. Basically, we are trying to push people to use auto import, right, to get libraries instead of needing custom shim packages like the classic Ember CLI Moment shim would do, because that's aligned with Embroider, because it's aligned with node modules, all that good stuff. But when you do that, yes, thank you. When you have Ember Auto Import and you have Moment in your dependencies, and Ember Auto Import sees you importing from Moment, it's going to add it to your build. So if you also have Ember CLI Moment shim, that's a duplicate copy, and you're definitely going to get both. And which one you're using, I'm not even sure, but one of them, right? So you just don't want both. But
is there any shared state that they also like? I feel like that's how locales worked and stuff. Like, could you end up in a case where you end up with the incorrect global state?
Yeah, if you customize all the locale data for one and not the other, it might not match what you expected. Yeah, and so
is it Moment itself like not recommended to be used anymore?
Correct.
I mean, as someone who uses the heck out of it, like it's
it's you should probably not add it to a new app. It's not actively developed. They're not like they're not telling people to like flee, but they're telling people like, we're not working on it anymore. So yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I actually think that if you do have a lot of Moment, you should probably wait a few more moments before you spend a lot of effort porting away from it, because temporal is a proposal to put Moment-like features directly in JavaScript, and it's quite close, I think. to shipping. And even if it doesn't, like, even if it's not shipped very, very soon into all the browsers you care about, somebody will ship a high quality polyfill for that. And that's what you should target, because then you'll be on a standard web platform thing where eventually you'll need no library at all. So I think it's important that we keep moment working, you know, and like, there's no need to rock the boat if you have a lot of moment, but you should pay attention to the guidelines here to make sure that you're not getting more copies of it than you think, and you're actually controlling the locale and time zone data. And for add-ons, what this comes down to is add-ons that need moments should really not bring their own copy of it, because then you really can't guarantee that it's going to match the app's copy. They should have a peer dependency on moment, meaning that the add-on author would document, to use this add-on, you should also add moment, right? And then the app author still has the control over how they're going to set up the locales and time zones. Also, the choice of moment versus moment time zone, you have to pick. So moment time zone is an NPM package that has more features, and it depends on moment, and it brings its own copy. So if you depend on both and you import from one sometimes and the other sometimes, you again will probably have 2 copies of moment, depending on how they hoist in the NPM tree. So moment is annoying to use because it's not really authored in a way that's oriented with ES modules. And the authors acknowledge that, but they're not actively working on it anymore. So there's just a bunch of known caveats. And that's also the controlling locale and time zone data thing here. That's the other bit of known caveats, which is there's standard instructions on momentjs.com about how to use it with Webpack. Embroider is built on Webpack. So those are the instructions you should use. And there's a little snippet there at the bottom of the screen that shows you when you're using, whether you're using auto import in a classic build or Embroider in an Embroider build, but in both cases, you can set the Webpack plugins here to customize exactly what parts of moment you're getting. So if you don't do that, you get everything, and it is quite large. So
one thing I wanted to mention about the peer dep stuff, there's a library that I wrote and maintain called Validate Peer Dependencies. And what it can do, it can fill the gap between NPM and Yarn, where you can specify dependencies. Some of them are optional, but some of them are required. And you don't really want to have to go and check your consumer that they actually did it, but you want a nice error if there's something missing you expect. So if you do follow this and you want to just make sure that they actually added the moment dependency to the project, you can use that Validate Peer Dependencies project. It's very similar to the error you'll get if, for example, you have an add-on that depends on Ember Auto Import v2, but the project doesn't. Like, it's the thing you'll get is very similar. Is a nice error that says, oh, this thing needs to have a dependency at this level, and it's convenient.
Can I take over the screen share?
Yeah.
I just want, because I wanted to show an example of moment. Actually, Ember moment actually has there are optional peer deps on both moment time zone and moment, and this is how it gets one or the other. So, you know, a v2 add-on has no build time stuff really, and that's why the embroider macros is a thing, because it lets you do some of the build time things you want to be able to express, but declaratively. So in this case, you know, within the add-on, whenever we want moment, we get it from this module, and this module it uses the embroider macros to figure out what's available. So if we've got moment time zone, we use that. If we've got moment, we use that. And you know, this add-on, the components in it were already written in a way so they could work with either. And sometimes they use the time zone features if they're there, and sometimes they don't if they don't. And so the goal here is that we would like add-ons to be as broad as they can be in terms of features, and not over specify things so that they only work with an app that uses moment versus moment time zone, for example. If you don't care, you could do this kind of thing and depend on either. So this is an example of an add-on that does need, like, it still exists because it's not just providing moment.js. People used to add it for that purpose, but now you don't have to. If you just want moment.js, you can just import moment.js and use this if you want the Ember components it provides you. I'm also working on Pick-a-Day. So
tomorrow.
This one, it's only a PR at this point. It's not merged. But this takes Ember Pick-a-Day all the way up to Ember Canary support, and it converts it to v2. And
you're my hero.
Thank you. well, it annoyed me in enough apps, right? And also because again, I'm on a rampage with this duplicate moment thing, and this depends on Ember CLI moment shim. So if you depend on Ember Pickaday, it will force a second copy of moment into your app. So it's just got to get fixed, right? So,
How many different ways can we bring moments into an app?
Right. And this one, I was able to go even further with the moment being optional thing because, so the two existing components that it gives you, these are called Pickaday input and Pickaday input lists, and they still exist in here and they pass the test the same. So I think I didn't break them. And they do use moment inside and have to, it's a strict requirement for them. But I also did a new modifier, which is really just a more direct translation of, like, if you just look at the Pickaday docs, it's just some JavaScript that you attach to some element. This is literally that. It's just attaching the JavaScript to an element that you put the Pickaday modifier on. And so it's much more one-to-one translation of just follow the Pickaday docs, not much extra opinions. And when you use it that way, and moment is optional. And so again, this add-on has now only an optional peer dep on moment or moment time zone, because depending on what parts of it you're using, you don't need it. So it's nice to not push really big dependencies like that onto apps when you didn't need it in all of the features of the add-on. So yeah. So it was fun porting the modifier. It's just nice to see all the Octane patterns, like replacing older code that hadn't been looked at in a while with all the Octane patterns feels really good. It works out nice.
Cool.
That'll be a relief not to have like these crazy different instances of moment time zone and you have no idea where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually quite difficult to debug because of the way it works. Either time zone and or the locale data, like the way you set it.
You set the
it
locale
up,
on the time zone. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
for those of us here on the East Coast, it's 8:30 p.m. If people have more questions, where should they post? Ember Help on Discord?
I mean, if it's topical to the talks and stuff, I feel free to use the US Boston channel. I think if it crosses the boundary into like a straight up help thing, that's pretty clear and easy. I think just having it in a local channel is fine for initial.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you, Ed, also for the tour through these things. And thanks everybody for your good questions. I want to take us through the wrap up here, which is that if you heard me just mention Discord. If you don't know about Ember Discord, you can go to Ember.js.com/community, and it's a chat place where a bunch of people ask questions. I'm missing a link here to Ember Discourse. You can also get to that same thing here at Ember.js.com/community. That's more like a message board style where questions are searchable publicly by other people too, and it's really good for like longer format questions. You can reach us at Boston Ember, and then the Ember Times newsletter goes out at least once a month, usually more like twice a month. That is a good way to keep up with all these things as they progress.